The morning sun peeked through the tall glass buildings of downtown as Olivia Chen straightened her blazer for the 5th time. Her stomach was in knots. After 6 months of applying to every internship in the city, she had finally landed a position at Vertex Innovations. Not just any company, but the tech giant everyone wanted to work for. "You can do this," she whispered to herself as she stared up at the 70-story building. Her hands clutched her warm leather bag tightly, the one her father had given her when she got into college. Inside was her lucky pen, her carefully formatted resume, and a small notebook already filled with ideas. The security guard smiled as he checked her temporary ID. "First day?" "That obvious, huh?" Olivia laughed nervously. "You'll do great, miss. Just remember to breathe." The elevator ride to the 65th floor felt like forever. Olivia stood between people in expensive suits who smelled like success. Her outfit from the department store suddenly felt inadequate. Lisa, the HR manager, greeted her with a warm smile and a folder of paperwork. "We're excited to have you, Olivia. Your professors spoke very highly of you." The first few hours passed in a blur of introductions, paperwork, and a tour of the sleek office spaces. Olivia tried to remember everyone's names, but there were so many faces, so many departments. "I need these reports delivered to Conference Room A immediately," said Raj, her supervisor, handing her a stack of folders just before lunch. "The executive team is waiting. Just drop them off and leave quietly." Olivia nodded eagerly. Her first real task. She wanted to show them all that she wasn't just another intern getting coffee. The hallways were like a maze. Olivia checked her watch. She was already 3 minutes late. Breaking into a light jog, she rounded the corner near what she hoped was Conference Room A. That's when it happened. She slammed into someone coming from the opposite direction. The files flew from her hands, papers scattering across the polished floor. As she stumbled backward, her right hand swung out instinctively to regain balance. Smack. The sound echoed in the hallway. Olivia's eyes widened in horror as she realized her hand had just connected with someone's face. Not just anyone's face. The man standing before her was tall, with piercing blue eyes that were now wide with shock. His strong jawline had a faint red mark forming where her hand had struck. She recognized him immediately from the company website, the business magazines, the Forbes lists. Alexander Reed, the 38-year-old billionaire CEO of Vertex Innovations. Time seemed to freeze. 3 executives who had been walking with him stood with their mouths open. A woman nearly dropped her tablet. Someone gasped. I'm so sorry," Olivia stammered, dropping to her knees to gather the scattered papers. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip them. "It was an accident. I didn't see you coming and..." She was going to be fired. On her first day. Her dream job gone in less than 4 hours. What would she tell her parents? Her friends? Everyone who had been so proud of her? Then something unexpected happened. Alexander Reed touched his cheek, looked down at her, and laughed. Not a forced corporate laugh, but a genuine one that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "That's one way to make an entrance," he said, kneeling down to help her collect the papers. "I don't think anyone has ever literally made such an impact on their first day." The tension in the hallway broke. A few nervous chuckles spread among the onlookers. "I'm Alexander Reed," he said, handing her the last few papers. "Olivia Chen," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Today's my first day as an intern in the marketing department." "Well, Olivia Chen," he said, standing up and straightening his perfectly tailored suit, "I think it's safe to say I won't forget your name." There was something in his eyes, curiosity, perhaps, or amusement, as he studied her face. "The meeting, sir," one of the executives reminded him. "Right," Alexander nodded, turning to leave. But before walking away, he looked back at Olivia with a smile that didn't quite match his reputation as a ruthless business titan. "Looking forward to seeing what else you bring to Vertex, Ms. Chen." As he walked away, Olivia stood frozen, clutching the files to her chest, her heart pounding. She had just slapped the billionaire CEO of Vertex Innovations. And somehow she still had a job. For the next week, Olivia kept her head down and worked twice as hard as any other intern. The story of her slapping Alexander Reed had spread through the office like wildfire. Some people laughed about it, while others whispered behind her back. She became known as the Slap Girl almost overnight. "Don't worry about it," Raj told her during their check-in meeting. "At least people know who you are now." That wasn't exactly comforting. Olivia threw herself into her work, arriving early and staying late. She organized the marketing files, researched competitors, and even fixed the always jamming copy machine that everyone else had given up on. Anything to make people forget about the incident. On Friday afternoon, Olivia was updating spreadsheets when her desk phone rang. She almost never used it and had to fumble to answer. "Hello, Olivia Chen speaking." "Ms. Chen, this is Patricia from Mr. Reed's office," said a cool, professional voice. "Mr. Reed would like to see you at 4:30 today. Can you confirm you'll be there?" Olivia's stomach dropped. This was it. The billionaire CEO had probably been too shocked to fire her on the spot last week, but now he had recovered and was ready to let her go. "Yes, I'll be there," she managed to say before hanging up. For the next 2 hours, Olivia could barely focus. She updated her resume on her phone during lunch, already thinking about which companies might still have open internship positions this late in the season. Not many, she guessed. At 4:25, she stood outside the executive floor, smoothing down her simple navy dress. The receptionist nodded for her to go in. Alexander Reed's office was nothing like she expected. Instead of the cold, sterile space she had imagined, it was warm and filled with books. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the city. Alexander himself stood looking out at that view, hands in his pockets. "Ms. Chen," he said, turning around. "Please, sit down." He gestured to a chair across from his desk. Olivia sat on the edge of the seat, ready to stand up again when he fired her. "Do you know why I asked you here?" he asked, sitting down across from her. "To fire me for slapping you, sir?" Olivia said before she could stop herself. Alexander's eyebrows shot up, and then he laughed, that same genuine laugh from the hallway. "Is that what you've been thinking all week?" Olivia nodded, her cheeks burning. "Well, I'm not firing you. Actually, quite the opposite." He leaned forward. "I've been watching your work this week. You've put in more hours than most of our full-time employees." Had he really been paying attention to her work schedule? "I have a problem, Ms. Chen," he continued, opening a folder on his desk. "Our home appliance division is struggling. Sales are down 40% from last year. The team there has tried everything they know, but they're stuck in old thinking patterns." He slid a report across the desk. Olivia glanced at it, not understanding why he was showing her this. "I need someone with fresh eyes. Someone who isn't afraid to, let's say, make an impact." His eyes twinkled with amusement at his own joke. "Sir? I want you to join me on a special project to revitalize the home appliance division. You'll work directly with me and report only to me." Olivia's mouth fell open. "But I'm just an intern. I don't know anything about appliances." "That's exactly why I want you. You're not weighed down by industry assumptions. Plus, anyone who accidentally slaps a CEO and then works twice as hard to make up for it has exactly the kind of grit I'm looking for." He stood up and walked around his desk. "The position would be temporary, 3 months. If we succeed, I'll find you a permanent place at Vertex. If we fail," he shrugged. "Well, at least we'll have tried something new." Olivia's mind raced. This had to be some kind of joke or test. "Why me?" she asked. "There are hundreds of employees here with more experience." Alexander leaned against his desk. "Because sometimes the most valuable perspective comes from someone who hasn't been told what's impossible yet." He held out his hand. "So, are you in?" Olivia looked at his outstretched hand, then back at his face. There was something challenging in his expression, as if he was daring her to say yes. This could either be the opportunity of a lifetime or a complete disaster. Either way, she'd never forgive herself if she didn't try. She stood up and shook his hand firmly. "I'm in." His smile widened. "Good. We start Monday, 7 a.m. And Olivia? Try not to slap any other executives between now and then." For the first time since the incident, Olivia laughed. Maybe this wasn't going to be so bad after all. Olivia arrived at the office at 6:45 Monday morning, coffee in hand and notebook ready. To her surprise, Alexander was already there, tie loosened and sleeves rolled up as he studied a wall covered in charts and product photos. "Good morning," she said, trying to sound confident despite her nerves. Alexander turned, looking pleased. 15 minutes early. I appreciate punctuality. He handed her a thick binder. Here's everything you need to know about our home appliance division. The good, the bad, and the ugly. For the next week, they worked in a small conference room that Alexander had converted into their project headquarters. The walls were soon covered with sticky notes, market research, and competitor analysis. Olivia absorbed everything like a sponge, asking questions and taking detailed notes. By the second week, she started to notice things that didn't add up. "May I say something?" she asked during one of their afternoon meetings. Alexander looked up from his laptop. "Always." "I think we're approaching this all wrong," she said, heart pounding. Was she really about to tell a billionaire business genius that his strategy was flawed? "We keep talking about making our appliances more high-tech to compete with imports, but that's not what the research shows customers want." She stood up and pointed to a chart. "People don't want more features they'll never use. They want reliability and simplicity. Our focus groups all say the same thing. They're tired of appliances that break after 2 years." Alexander frowned, tapping his pen against the table. Olivia braced herself for his anger. "Instead," he said, "go on." Encouraged, she outlined her alternative approach. When she finished, the room fell silent. "That completely contradicts our current strategy," he finally said. Olivia's confidence wavered. "I know, and I'm just an intern, but—" "No," he interrupted, "don't do that. Don't diminish your ideas because of your position. If you're right, you're right." He studied her notes for a moment. "Let's test your theory." From that day on, their working relationship shifted. Alexander began treating her not as an intern, but as a partner. He challenged her ideas and expected her to challenge his. Their debates often ran late into the evening, with takeout containers piling up as they refined their new strategy. One night, as they worked past midnight, Olivia noticed Alexander staring at her. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Nothing," he said, looking away. "It's just refreshing to work with someone who cares more about finding the right answer than agreeing with me." "Do people usually just agree with you?" "Almost always," he admitted. "It's one of the downsides of success. People tell you what they think you want to hear." "Well, I think your marketing approach is outdated and your product design team is stuck in 2010, Olivia said with a straight face. Alexander burst out laughing. "See, refreshing." As weeks passed, Olivia began to see beyond the billionaire CEO persona. She noticed how he remembered the night janitor's name and asked about his kids, how he kept a jar of premium coffee in the break room because he knew the staff complained about the cheap stuff, how his eyes lit up when talking about innovations that could make people's lives better. For his part, Alexander found himself looking forward to their meetings. Olivia's perspective was untainted by corporate politics, and her enthusiasm reminded him of his early days building the company. Sometimes he found himself watching her as she worked, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when concentrating, or how she'd pace around the room when thinking through a problem. They maintained strict professionalism, of course. He was careful never to stand too close. She was careful to call him Mr. Reed in front of others. But alone in their project room, they'd fallen into using first names and sharing occasional personal stories. "My father still thinks I should have become a doctor," Olivia admitted one evening. "Mine wanted me to take over his hardware store," Alexander replied. "What happened?" "He sold it to pay for my first year at MIT." His voice softened. He never saw Vertex succeed. In these small moments, barriers dropped, and they connected not as CEO and intern, but simply as two people passionate about their work and increasingly aware of a connection neither was ready to acknowledge. 3 months into the project, Olivia walked into the office feeling unusually confident. Their appliance redesign was nearly ready to launch. Focus groups loved the prototypes, sleek, reliable machines with straightforward features that actually worked. No unnecessary bells and whistles, just quality engineering at a fair price. She and Alexander had worked countless late nights to make it happen, and the results looked promising. She found Alexander in their project room, staring at his phone with a tense expression. "What's wrong?" she asked, setting down her coffee. He wordlessly handed her his phone. On the screen was an article from Tech Business Daily, Global Tech unveils new eco-smart home appliance line. Olivia's stomach dropped as she scrolled through the article. Global Tech, Vertex's biggest competitor, had just announced a nearly identical product line. Worse still, they were launching next week, a full month ahead of Vertex's planned release. "They beat us to market," she whispered. Alexander nodded grimly. "Emergency board meeting at 10. They're waiting for us in the main conference room." The boardroom was filled with stern faces when they arrived. Olivia felt out of place among the executives in their expensive suits, but Alexander had insisted she attend. "This is a disaster," said Richard Mason, the oldest board member, glaring at the presentation on the screen. "We've invested millions in this rebrand, and now we'll look like we're copying Global Tech." "How did they even know what we were working on?" demanded Tina Wang, the CFO. "This is too similar to be coincidence." "It doesn't matter how they knew," Alexander said. "What matters is how we respond." The discussion quickly turned heated. Some board members wanted to scrap the entire project and start over. Others suggested rushing their launch to compete directly with Global Tech. "We'll look desperate if we launch right after them," Richard argued. "We should cut our losses and focus on next year's tech innovations instead." Olivia sat quietly, her mind racing. Scrapping the project would waste months of work. But launching a copycat product wouldn't work either. There had to be another option. "Ms. Chen, you've been unusually quiet," Alexander said suddenly, drawing everyone's attention to her. "You've been central to this project. What's your take?" All eyes turned to her. Olivia felt her throat go dry. These people controlled billions in company assets. Who was she to advise them? She took a deep breath, remembering Alexander's words. "Don't diminish your ideas because of your position." "I think there's a third option," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "We don't compete with Global Tech at all." Richard scoffed. "Young lady, they're our direct competitor." "Exactly," Olivia continued, standing up and walking to the screen. "And that's why we shouldn't fight on their terms." She pulled up their marketing materials. Global Tech is promoting their appliances as high-tech and feature-rich. Their press release mentions 15 smart functions and app connectivity. She clicked to another slide. "But our research consistently showed that consumers are tired of complicated gadgets. They want reliability and simplicity." She turned to face the board. "I think we lean into that difference. Instead of hiding our launch, we accelerate it but change our messaging." For the next 10 minutes, Olivia outlined her strategy. They would position their appliances as the antidote to overcomplicated smart homes. Simple, dependable, built to last. They would embrace being different, not try to beat Global Tech at their own game. When she finished, the room was silent. Then Richard laughed dismissively. "So your grand plan is to tell customers our products do less? That's your strategy." "My strategy," Olivia replied, holding her ground, "is to tell customers our products do what matters perfectly instead of doing 100 things poorly." Alexander, who had been watching silently, finally spoke. "I support this approach." His voice was firm. "It's bold, but it's true to what we've built." "It's a huge risk," Tina warned. "If it fails, we lose market share and damage the brand." "And if it works," Alexander countered, "we stand out in a crowded market and build customer loyalty based on quality, not gimmicks." He looked around the room. "I'm backing this plan. Who's with me?" The vote was far from unanimous, but Alexander's confidence swayed enough board members to proceed. After the meeting, Olivia and Alexander worked late into the night, revising their entire launch strategy. Around midnight, as they finished the new marketing brief, Alexander sighed heavily. "What if they're right?" he said quietly. "What if I'm risking the company on the wrong approach?" Olivia had never seen him look uncertain before. In that moment, he wasn't the billionaire CEO, he was just a person worried about making a mistake. "I believe in what we've built," she said simply. "And I believe in you." He looked up, meeting her eyes with an intensity that made her heart skip. For a moment, something unspoken passed between them. Then his phone rang. The display showed a photo of a beautiful blonde woman. "Victoria," he said, glancing at his phone. "I should take this." As he stepped out to answer, Olivia turned back to her laptop, reminding herself that whatever connection she felt with Alexander Reed was just professional respect between colleagues, nothing more. It had to be. Their worlds were too far apart for anything else. 2 weeks later, their pivot strategy was showing surprising success. Early sales numbers exceeded projections, and tech blogs were praising Vertex for offering a refreshingly practical alternative to global tech's complicated systems. The crisis had turned into an unexpected win. Late Friday afternoon, Alexander stopped by Olivia's temporary desk with an envelope. "What's this?" she asked, looking up from her computer. "An invitation," he replied. "The Hammond Foundation is hosting their annual charity gala tomorrow night. As the minds behind our most successful product launch this year, I think we both should attend." Olivia opened the envelope. The elegant card inside mentioned Black Tire and a $5,000 per plate dinner benefiting children's education. "I couldn't possibly." "The company is covering it," Alexander said quickly. "This is a professional opportunity, Olivia. Many of our investors will be there. It would be good for them to meet the person who helped save our biggest project of the year." She hesitated. "I don't have anything to wear to something like this." Alexander checked his watch. "The stores are still open. Take the company card." He handed her a sleek black credit card. "Consider it a thank you for your hard work." Before she could protest further, he added, "The car will pick you up at 7," and walked away. The next evening, Olivia stood in front of her apartment mirror, barely recognizing herself. She'd found a simple dark blue gown that the saleswoman assured her was appropriate for such an event. Her normally practical ponytail was replaced by loose waves falling around her shoulders. She felt like an imposter, but at least she looked the part. The charity gala was held at the city's most exclusive hotel. As Olivia stepped through the grand doors, she was immediately overwhelmed. Celebrities mingled with business tycoons. Waiters carried trays of champagne and tiny foods she couldn't identify. Diamond jewelry sparkled under crystal chandeliers. She scanned the room for Alexander but couldn't find him. Several people glanced at her curiously, clearly wondering who she was. Olivia clutched her small purse and considered finding a quiet corner to hide in until it was time to leave. "You look lost," said a friendly voice beside her. Olivia turned to find a woman in her early 30s smiling at her. She had Alexander's same blue eyes and confident stance. "I am a bit," Olivia admitted. "I'm Sophia Reed," the woman said, offering her hand. "Alexander's sister." "Olivia Chen. I work with your brother on the appliance project, I know," Sophia interrupted with a smile. "He's mentioned you several times, actually." Before Olivia could process that information, Sophia linked arms with her. "Come on, I'll introduce you to people who aren't completely boring." Over the next hour, Sophia guided Olivia through the crowd, introducing her to friendly faces and helping her navigate the unspoken rules of these events. Between introductions, they chatted easily. Olivia found herself genuinely liking Alexander's sister. "So how are you enjoying working with my workaholic brother?" Sophia asked as they found a quiet spot near the windows. "He's not what I expected," Olivia replied honestly. Sophia laughed. "Most people only see the billionaire CEO. They don't see Alex, who used to make me pancakes when our parents were too busy working." "Your parents weren't around much?" Olivia asked, surprised. Sophia's expression softened. They owned a small hardware store, worked 7 days a week to keep it running, and saved for our education. She sipped her champagne. "Then they died in a car accident our senior year of high school. Alex was only 18. "I had no idea," Olivia said quietly. "He doesn't talk about it much," Sophia explained. "After the funeral, he took over the store, worked day and night, and somehow still graduated top of his class. He sold the store to pay for MIT, lived on ramen noodles, and started Vertex from our tiny apartment." Olivia looked across the room where Alexander was now talking to a group of investors. "He never mentioned any of this." "Of course not," Sophia smiled fondly at her brother. "He doesn't want sympathy, or people to think he's some kind of inspirational story." She turned back to Olivia. "Did you know he funds 50 full scholarships each year for kids who lost their parents? No publicity, no tax write-offs. He just does it." Across the room, Alexander caught sight of Olivia speaking with his sister. Something about seeing her in the elegant blue dress, looking completely at ease with Sophia, made him pause mid-conversation. He excused himself from the investors and made his way over. "I see you've met my sister," he said as he joined them. "Your sister is delightful," Olivia replied with a genuine smile. "She's been rescuing me all evening." Sophia checked her watch. "And now I need to rescue Patrick from that boring hedge fund manager." She squeezed Olivia's hand. "Don't be a stranger, Olivia. Anyone who can make my brother talk about something besides work is someone I want to know better." As Sophia walked away, Alexander raised an eyebrow. "What exactly did she tell you?" "Nothing embarrassing," Olivia assured him. "Just things I didn't know about you." Their conversation was interrupted by a tall, glamorous blonde who slipped her arm through Alexander's. "Darling, you've been ignoring me all evening," she said with a practiced pout before turning curious eyes to Olivia. "Victoria, this is Olivia Chen. She's been instrumental in our new product line," Alexander said formally. "Olivia, this is Victoria Palmer." Victoria gave Olivia a quick once-over. "Oh, the little intern everyone's talking about. How sweet." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I hope they're paying you well for saving the day." "Olivia isn't just an intern," Alexander said, his voice cooler than Olivia had ever heard it. "She's one of the most insightful people at Vertex." Victoria laughed lightly. "Darling, you always did have a soft spot for charity cases." Olivia felt her cheeks burn. "If you'll excuse me, I showed." "Stay right where you are," Alexander said firmly, surprising both women. He turned to Victoria. "We need to talk. Now." As he led Victoria away, Olivia couldn't help noticing the tense set of his shoulders and the way his jaw clenched. Something told her their conversation wouldn't be pleasant. Later, as she stood alone watching couples dance, Alexander appeared beside her. "I'm sorry about Victoria," he said quietly. "It's fine," Olivia replied, though it wasn't. "She's very beautiful." Alexander's gaze remained on the dance floor. "Yes, she is. She's also not in my life anymore." Olivia turned to look at him, surprised. "What?" "Some relationships exist because they're comfortable, expected." His eyes met hers. "Until suddenly they're not." The weight of his words hung between them as the music played on. The success of the appliance line changed everything for Olivia. What had started as an unexpected project became the highlight of Vertex's year. Her name was mentioned in company-wide emails, and executives who had never noticed her now smiled in the hallways. Her 3-month special assignment had been extended twice, but now, after nearly 6 months, her internship was officially ending. On a rainy Tuesday morning, Olivia sat in a coffee shop across from Thomas Yang, the head recruiter from Rivera Tech, Vertex's biggest competitor. "We've been watching your work at Vertex," Thomas said, sliding a folder across the table. "That appliance launch was brilliant. We'd like you to join our team." Olivia opened the folder and nearly choked on her coffee when she saw the salary offer. It was more than triple what she'd hoped for as a starting position. "This is very generous," she managed to say. "We think you're worth it," Thomas replied with a confident smile. "Plus, you'd be starting as assistant marketing director, not some entry-level position. Corner office, your own team, direct access to our CEO." Olivia stared at the offer letter, her mind racing. This was the kind of opportunity most people spent years working toward. It would completely change her financial situation. She could finally pay off her student loans, help her parents with their mortgage. "Can I have some time to think about it?" she asked. "Of course, but we'll need an answer by Friday." Thomas stood to leave. "We're excited about the possibility of having you on our team, Olivia, very excited." Back at Vertex, Olivia found 3 more job offers waiting in her email. Word had gotten around about her role in the successful product launch, and companies were eager to snatch her up. None were as impressive as Rivera Tech's offer, but all were better than anything she'd expected as a recent graduate. She was reading through them when Raj, her original supervisor, knocked on her cubicle wall. "Got a minute?" he asked. "HR wants to talk about your future here." In the HR office, Olivia was offered a permanent position at Vertex, junior marketing specialist. It was a good role with decent pay, but nowhere near what Rivera was offering. And she'd be working under Raj, not with Alexander. "We're really impressed with your work," said Diane from HR. "But everyone starts somewhere. This is an excellent entry point." Olivia thanked her and promised to give her answer soon. As she walked back to her desk, she felt conflicted. Vertex had given her an incredible opportunity, but Rivera was offering an amazing future. Plus, continuing at Vertex would mean seeing Alexander every day, which was becoming increasingly complicated. Since the charity gala, something had shifted between them. Their late-night strategy sessions had become more personal. Sometimes their hands would touch reaching for the same document, and neither would pull away immediately. They'd started having lunch together occasionally, talking about books, films, places they wanted to travel. She'd even met his sister for coffee twice. But they had carefully maintained professional boundaries. Alexander never mentioned Victoria again, and Olivia never asked. Whatever she felt for him, and she was trying hard not to examine those feelings too closely, had to be set aside. He was still the CEO. She was still just starting her career. That afternoon, Alexander called her into his office. "I heard you met with Rivera Tech this morning," he said without preamble. Olivia's eyes widened. "How did you?" "It's a small industry. Word gets around." His expression was unreadable. "Are you taking it?" "I haven't decided yet." Alexander nodded, looking down at some papers on his desk. "They can offer you more than we can right now. It makes sense to consider it." His casual tone stung more than it should have. Did he really not care if she left? "I have other offers too," she said, not sure why she was telling him this. "I'm not surprised." He finally looked up at her. "You're very talented, Olivia. Any company would be lucky to have you." This formal, distant version of Alexander felt like a stranger compared to the man who had stayed up until 3 a.m. with her arguing about marketing strategies and sharing takeout. "Is that all?" she asked, trying to keep the hurt from her voice. Alexander hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. I just wanted to say you should make the decision that's best for your career. Don't let other considerations hold you back." On Thursday night, Olivia sat at her kitchen table surrounded by offer letters. Tomorrow was her deadline, and she still hadn't decided. The Rivera offer was by far the best financially, but something held her back from accepting it. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Heard you're considering Rivera. Big Brother is moping around like someone stole his favorite toy. Dinner tomorrow to talk about it." Olivia smiled sadly at the message. She'd grown fond of Alexander's sister, but starting a friendship with her would only make things more complicated if she left Vertex. After another hour of weighing pros and cons, Olivia made her decision. She would take the Rivera offer. It was the smart career move. Clean break, fresh start, no more confusing feelings for a man who was way out of her league. The next morning, she dropped off her official letter declining Vertex's offer with HR, then began cleaning out her desk. She'd deliberately chosen to do it during the executive team's weekly meeting so she wouldn't run into Alexander. As she was packing her personal items, Sophia appeared at her cubicle. "So it's true," Alexander's sister said, leaning against the wall. "You're leaving us for the dark side." Olivia smiled weakly. "It's a good opportunity." Sophia studied her for a moment. "Can I give you some unsolicited advice?" "At this point, why not?" "Don't leave for the wrong reasons." Sophia's usual playful tone was gone. "If you're leaving because Rivera is your dream job, great. But if you're leaving because you're afraid of what might happen if you stay..." She shook her head. "That's just running away." "It's complicated," Olivia said quietly. "Of course it is. Anything worth having usually is." Sophia straightened up. "I've known my brother his whole life. I've never seen him as happy as he's been these past few months working with you." Before Olivia could respond, Sophia was gone, leaving her alone with a half-packed box and a head full of doubt. Olivia's last day at Vertex felt surreal. She'd already said most of her goodbyes, shaken hands with colleagues, exchanged contact information with the few she'd grown close to. All that remained was to turn in her badge and walk out the door one final time. She'd deliberately scheduled her exit for Friday afternoon, knowing Alexander would be in budget meetings until evening. It seemed easier this way, a clean break without awkward goodbyes or the confusion she felt whenever he was near. As she packed the last few items from her desk, memories flooded back. The slap that started everything. Late nights brainstorming in their project room. The triumph when their strategy worked. Dancing around each other's feelings while pretending they were just colleagues. "So that's it? You're just leaving?" Olivia froze at the sound of Alexander's voice. She turned to find him standing at her cubicle entrance, looking more disheveled than she ever seen him, tie loosened, hair slightly messy, as if he'd been running his hands through it. "I thought you were in meetings all afternoon," she said. "I was. I left." He glanced at her nearly empty desk. "Were you going to say goodbye or just disappear?" "I left you a thank you note," she said, nodding toward an envelope on her desk. Alexander made no move to pick it up. "A note. 6 months working side by side, and I get a note." "What did you expect?" Olivia asked, a hint of frustration breaking through. "A big emotional scene in front of everyone. You're the CEO, I'm an intern who's moving on. This is how it works." "Is that all this was to you?" A CEO and an intern working together. Olivia looked away. "It doesn't matter what it was. It's over now. Rivera's offering me an amazing opportunity. And Vertex isn't." There was an edge to his voice she'd never heard before. Junior marketing specialist with entry-level pay versus assistant marketing director with triple the salary. Olivia shook her head. "It's not even close." "I didn't know about HR's offer until yesterday," Alexander said, stepping closer. "If I had..." "What?" "You would have offered me more money. A better title." Olivia finally met his eyes. "That's not why I'm leaving, and you know it." The tension between them seemed to fill the small space. Somewhere in the distance, phones rang and people talked, but in this moment it was just the two of them. "Why are you leaving then?" Alexander asked, his voice quiet now. Olivia took a deep breath. "Because every day I stay makes it harder to pretend that I don't feel." She stopped herself. "It doesn't matter. We both know nothing could happen between us." "Why not?" "Because you're Alexander Reed, Billionaire CEO, and I'm just..." "Don't," he interrupted sharply. "Don't diminish yourself. Not with me." "Fine. Then because it's inappropriate. Because there's a power dynamic. Because people would think I slept my way to the top. Because it would complicate everything." She picked up a box. "I need to go." Alexander moved to block her path. "What if I told you I have a solution?" "For what?" "For all of it." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. "I was going to wait until after the meeting to show you this, but since you've determined to leave..." Olivia set down her box and took the paper, unfolding it cautiously. It was an organizational chart with a new division highlighted, Innovation Lab, direct report to Board of Directors. "What is this?" "A new department," Alexander explained. "Independent from existing structures, reporting directly to the board, not to me. Focused on developing new product lines and markets." He pointed to the top of the chart. "And it needs a director."